You're not broke because you're lazy. You're not broke because there's some evil spell on you. And you're not broke because you didn't try. You're basically broke, or you're in a bind, or you're feeling some type of despair because of generational curse. In other words, something that happened years and years ago, before you were born, before my time, your time, is holding you back from achieving or getting the growth that you need to get to, survive financially. If this is the first time you're joining me, my name is Mel. This is Team U Finance, where we talk about leveling up our money. We talk about self growth and perspectives. And we also talk about how to achieve wealth to gain prosperity in the long run. All right, so let's get into it. The first thing that I want to do is basically, define what, I think generational curses, or what has been told to us that generational curses. So, generational curse is basically something that is passed down from generation to generation. In other words, it's the same stumbling block, nothing changes, you're in the same cycle. It's, has a lot to do with poverty. You're in the same set of financial strains, and nothing seems to be getting better. And why it is defined as generational curses, because you look back and you say, well, I'm struggling, and my family struggled, and the family before that struggled, and before that, and before that. It's like a few generations that are handed down. So it's a cycle, or something that hasn't been broken, that just keeps being handed down from generation to generation, different times. So during this time that you're living now, it's your generation. This same form of poverty, or setbacks that you're dealing with, it could be handed down to the next generation. And so that's how we define it, as generational curse, or basically generational setbacks. So the big question here is this: it's like, okay, now we identify, we know what generational curse is. What causes it, and how do we break it? But before we get into what causes it, let's talk about the first thing that we can do before we go to the root of the problem. After we discover what causes generational curse, we can basically try to change certain things. If this is the first time you're joining me again, if you haven't already, please comment, like, and subscribe to the channel. Really helps to let the channel grow and pushes it through the algorithm. So, what caused generational curse? Generational curse was caused because many years ago, a lot of us, from the beginning, from the door, we weren't really afforded with many things. We weren't given a chance. We weren't given, a lot to work with. And so as a result, with the little that we had, we were already in the negative. And because we were already in the negative, we couldn't find a way to turn it to positive. So we just ended up using what we had. And sometimes that made us come up a little bit short. Okay. That's essentially what caused generational curse. And although generational curse was caused, and some people's in the families were able to get out and start to achieve something, started to get better, a lot of people didn't follow suit. They still stayed stuck in the dilemma that they were in, and say, okay, this is what I was born into, this is what I see, and this is what I know, and I'm going to continue, I'm going to stay here. But what I feel about it is that generational curse can be changed, it can be broken. All right. And how do we break generational curse? And this is exactly what we talk about on this channel. We break generational curse, or we break the cycle, by leveling up, by changing what was done before, or we basically try to undo. Okay, we try to jump, we try to go over that hurdle. So for example, let's say maybe a generation ago, you heard the stories that maybe your family couldn't really work at the places that they wanted to work. They weren't afforded the opportunity, right? What did they do? They went out, they found different trades, they found different things to do. And in finding different things or different trades to do, they basically was able to achieve some more wealth and money. They broke the cycle of poverty. That is the key. You have to break the cycle of poverty in order for generational curse to be broken or to change. If you don't break the cycle or change that feeling of poverty or that act of poverty, you're never going to get out of that generational curse or that rut. So in other words, it's like we have to move forward. I always, look in my own life, and I said, there were some things that I wanted to do to change my life. And one of the first things that I did, again, when I was younger, I made sure that I got myself an education. I got myself a trade, because not that I knew it at the time, but as young as I was mature enough to know that, hey, I got to be able to take care of myself. I got to make a living. I can't rob Peter to pay Paul every day. I got to keep my head above water. So I figured if I went out and I got some type of training that would help me to break the cycle and to break, that curse. Another way that I figured, that we can break generational curses, that we have to start moving around in circles or places that are positive. Because if you're struggling with dealing with being broke or some form of generational curse, and you are around people that, they're not even trying to grow, trying to be different or better, it's not going to get broken. It's not going to get broken. You're going to stay on the same level and it's going to continue to repeat the cycle. It's just going to keep going on and on and on. So that's another way. We have to kind of move in circles and places that are positive and that show us how to achieve and how to have growth in order to break generational curse. So, of course, those things were out of our control. But now we're in a time where we can control a lot of things. And how do we control it? By changing, by starting with us first to break those cycles or those things that hurt us. We have to learn to say, listen, I know what happened in the past happened. It molded me or it shaped me the way that I am today, but I'm not going to keep living in that type of cycle. I'm going to break that cycle. I'm going to move ahead and do something else. A lot of times, we have our hopes and we have our dreams, and the simple reason why they don't come true is because we don't believe in ourselves. We don't believe that we can do it. Our minds have been so molded to think that nothing is going to work. And in order to break any type of situation or any type of generational curse or any setback, we have to believe in ourselves first. When I started, trying to change my life and do certain things and have a come up, and I'm still working on it. By the grace of God, I'm still working on it. I'm still trying. I'm still trying to do what I have to do each day to get better. The very first thing that I did, I said, you know what? I'm going to clean up everything that I feel is stagnant and holding me back. Everything that I felt was in my way, I said, no, I got to break away. I got to break free. I got to change the way that I think and the way that I do things. And yes, I've seen some results. I've totally revamped every single thing that I did in my life. As a matter of fact, I wrote an ebook. It's called 10 Steps to Level Up Your Money. And it's no miraculous writing, but all it is just, basically a compilation of 10 things that I believe that, if you have those things in place or you try to set those things, it could kind of change a little bit. It could break cycles. It could break bad cycles or break bad financial cycles. Okay. It's called 10 Steps to Level Up Your Money. It's a nice, easy read and it's an easy download, once you purchase the book. It just gives you some tips and ideas on things that you should have or try to set in place in order to grow and level up your money. So again, to break any form of curse or any type of issues or setback, we have to basically start by leveling up. We have to get the basic things and the basic necessities in life that will allow us to, have financial growth. That's exactly, the beginning of, breaking generational curse. Again, please comment, like, and subscribe if this video resonates with you or you believe that the content, could be shared with somebody else. Please share the content so far. I just want to say, I believe that anything that is deemed as bad or horrible, I believe that it can be changed. Once you feel good about yourself and, you're positive and you have that self-esteem that's telling you or building you up, you got to feel good. And once you feel good, sky's the limit. So with that said, people, if you've gotten this far in my message, I thank you for your time. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. And remember, we're not looking back. We're moving forward. We're not looking back at the generations before, the generations, that's even 2 times before us. We're focusing on now. We're focusing on breaking cyclical curses or generational curses.